Hey Stella,
You again?
it's been way too long. We need to do another devlog.
Ugh. Fine.
Hello everyone. Welcome to a new Project Stella devlog. For those of you who are new, Project Stella is a game I'm working on that's an action platformer blend of Jak and Daxter and The Legend of Zelda. It's been a while since the last video, and I've made quite a bit of progress, so let's get into it. As you all saw in the introduction, I have been messing around with creating animated cutscenes inside of Unity. I've made a lot of progress, which is a big win for me. If you watched the last devlog, you would know that one of my main goals is to have animated cutscenes to help tell the story, just like in Jak and Daxter. Using the timeline editor in Unity has been interesting. In some ways it was pretty easy to set up. I can take an animation I made in Blender and drop it into the timeline and begin editing like I'm editing a video. When it comes to Stella, I can use a player model in the timeline, which is great because it means whatever outfit the player has equipped will show in the cutscene. In addition to that, I can have multiple layers of animation on one rig. This means I can separate face animation from body animation in Blender and just merge them together in Unity. I think it could also allow me to reuse animations and layer partial animations over them to speed up the process, but I need to test that out more. In order to have greater control over the camera for the cutscene, I made a camera rig inside of Blender. The rig covers most basic camera movements. You can think of it as a tripod with some extra features. The camera can be raised or lowered while it's looking at a target bone that can be used to frame the shot. The camera has a lens bone that allows me to zoom in and out. The root bone can be freely animated, allowing for rotation and positioning to dolly the camera around. The rig itself is invisible inside of Unity, so I created a camera mesh in order to preview the camera in Unity's editor. The first thing I tried was getting the potions animation I did to test Stella's rig into Unity. This one was quite simple since it was only one clip, and I'm very happy with the way it turned out, but the face was a struggle, as I mentioned in my last video. I got it working eventually, which I'll have to talk more about later. Next, I tried the cutscene you saw at the beginning of the video, and this is where things get tricky. For this animation, I created a few different clips. I don't think I needed to do this, but I guess I wanted to test out how all of this works. The way I thought about it was that each shot should be a new clip, and that quickly fell apart for a few reasons. For one, I found that I could edit the cameras differently. If I leave an empty space after a clip, the timeline holds the last frame, so I can technically pack in as many camera angles as I want into one animation clip and just edit the cameras in the timeline, which is fantastic. Second, I'm going to have to separate clips whenever I decide to move Stella's root bone around. For example, Stella sliding off the rock and walking away is one clip, so I had to figure out how to get her root bone from the rock over to where I end the clip. So I decided to do it in just one frame and move Stella back into position. But when I played the clip back in Unity, there was jitter in the cutscene where that position shift happened. In order to fix that, I had to split the clip into two where that move happened. There are also smaller cutscenes that I added. These play whenever I want the game to show the player interacting with another object, like opening a chest, picking up important items, or pulling a lever, which is something I'm going to be doing in the future. These would take too much time and effort with the timeline. I would have to relink one timeline to each and every item, chest, or lever in the game to get it working, so instead I just use the animator component. The animation is on Stella and it's triggered by whatever interaction needs to take place. Also, since I'm not using the timeline for these, it made sense to have a camera setup on Stella's rig. This camera rig uses my custom camera system, which allows me to switch between different rigs fluidly during gameplay. I'm using BoingKit for Stella's ear physics, and it has been a godsend. There are a handful of problems I have with BoingKit though. I think BoingKit needs to figure out how to get centrifugal force working, or maybe I need to figure out how to get that working in BoingKit. I'm not sure which one. Whenever Stella spins, I need to deactivate the boing bone component to prevent her ears from collapsing in on themselves. In the last video, I spoke about how I was having trouble exporting blend shapes from Blender into Unity. I wasn't able to find a proper solution to the export problem, so instead I tried to solve the problem inside of Unity. First, I tried to create a script that acted like a driver inside of Unity. Basically, I tried to use the position and scale of the face bones to drive the blend shapes themselves. The problem I found myself having is that I couldn't figure out how to get the values I needed in order to drive the blend shapes. Since bones in Unity work different from how they work in Blender, I have to do a bunch of math in order to get the driver script to read the same, and I wasn't able to get that to work. At this point, it just became an issue of whether or not I wanted to invest more time trying to figure this out or just do something that I knew would work. So after a few tweets where I celebrated a little too soon, I just gave up and did the very thing that I didn't want to do. I re-rigged Stella's face to use bones, and I scrapped using blend shapes entirely. To keep the visual style similar to what blend shapes would look like, I decided to keep all the bones I used to animate the face, and use them to drive actions instead. Even though this isn't what I wanted initially, this new method is much more flexible. I can animate the original face bones, and if I want, I can go in and animate the rest of the face for more fine-tuned control. By the way, going forward, I'll be uploading all my videos to Patreon with additional footage. For this video, I go into greater detail about how Stella's rig works. So subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/projectstella_game if you want to see the extended devlogs with deep dives for developers and enthusiasts. Stella has some new collectibles to find. The Health Orb and Experience Orb are now both Health and Experience crystals. Both of these collectibles can be found in boxes and will also be dropped by enemies. The Health Orb was made to look like a little heart and it heals 1 hit point. The Experience Crystal increases the player's experience by 1. Once I have the skill system working, the player will be able to purchase skill upgrades for Stella to improve her platforming and combat abilities. The next tier of Experience Crystals is the Experience Cluster. At the moment it looks a bit like a Lego crystal, so I'm probably going to change that, but as a placeholder it works. They currently grant 25 experience, however I may increase that amount since they will be more rare. Next I made the Heart Cluster, which was made to look like a human heart, but instead it looks like a bunny raiding a popcorn bucket. Again, placeholder. The Heart Cluster will actually fully heal Stella, and will also increase her total hit points by 1. The last set of collectibles are 5 pieces of an ancient tablet that will be scattered in each level. Collect all 5 pieces to merge the tablet, and Stella will learn some lore and possibly find some secrets. I should also mention that there are story collectibles. So the gear Stella needs to fix the hoist is hidden around the level. Collectibles like this will be needed for completing quests, and there may be some other uses for them going forward. I've also included a display in the utility menu to show the player how many of each item has been found in each level. I also updated the UI. There is now a compass in the top right hand corner along with the day-night display that shows the sun and the moon. I don't think these will be much beyond that. I'm not a big fan of putting markers on the compass to point the player exactly where they have to go. Instead, I'd like to put some effort into the map so that the player has all the tools they need to figure out where they need to go without having me hold their hand. The equipment screen now has 3 categories. I separated the armor out into armor and clothes. This way I can ensure different equipment can be separated based on their utility. The journal now keeps track of active and completed quests. Currently, if you highlight a quest, the objective and descriptions are shown on the side. Same goes for completed quests, except the objectives won't show because the quest is complete. And I don't have a quest tracker yet, but that is definitely coming. The enemies received a pretty big update as well, not just in AI, but also in how they interact with the environment. I wasn't totally happy with the way you fight the rolling lizard. Having them end up on their back after their main rolling attack didn't make much sense, especially if it's something that they've been doing all their life. They should be able to roll around without ending up in an awkward position like that. So instead, the only time the lizard will end up on their back is when the player knocks them upside down to reveal their soft underbelly. I also added a bite attack that they do while they roll is on a cooldown. Next, I added a system that keeps track of all the enemies focused on the player, and ensures that too many attacks aren't happening all at once. It's a work in progress, since it's still easy to get surrounded and overwhelmed, but this way each rolling attack will happen sequentially rather than all at once. The enemies also move towards a set of points around the player that keep them from bunching together or crashing into each other. Most importantly, I added some physics to the enemy that allows them to get knocked around the environment. And also, you can knock them off of ledges, which just adds more variety to the combat. I started working on swimming. This took many forms since I knew I wanted swimming, but I wasn't sure how I wanted swimming to work. I started by treating swimming on the surface the same way I treat movement. This hasn't changed. I think it's a really effective way of moving the character around with a third-person camera. Jumping into the water results in a slight loss of control. Stella needs to regain herself on the surface. Depending on how high players jump from, Stella may end up going deeper into the water before swimming back to the surface. When underwater, Stella used to swim like Lara Croft.
You're doing it. You're doing it. Peter, look, you're doing it. See?
But it was quite difficult to control, and I really didn't like how it felt. I changed this to work the same way it does with surface swimming, the only difference being there are 2 buttons that handle swimming downwards and swimming upwards, and I just think this feels much better overall. I also added support for bodies of water to apply forces to Stella. The rivers will push Stella in the right direction, and the waters will send her falling to her death. All of this is still very early, so animations are stiff, and it'll probably need more refinement, but I'm very happy where it is. Since I started working on this project, level design is something that has stumped me. I'll have to talk about the art another time because I have worked on some stuff, but there's so much to go over. But for this video, I'm only going to be focusing on the design. I guess mild spoilers ahead as well. Over time, I've started to understand where I might be going wrong. The basic premise for the intro of the demo is that Stella is sent to help solve a problem up at the mine that the villagers use. The hoist that usually brings them up is broken, so she has to take an alternative path to get to the entrance of the mine. Along the way, she has to do a couple quests, mostly searching for the items and fighting enemies, until finally she fixes the hoist and saves the day. Early on, the level looked completely different to what it looks like now. I have generally always had the same idea: a hidden path beside the bridge that leads to a mine entrance area, and a river that flows down towards a waterfall. The hidden path would be a linear tutorial level, and it would open up into a more sandbox level that allowed the player to explore and play in. Moving down towards the waterfall and the hoist, the level would loop back towards the bunny village, which would end the first chapter of the demo. The first problem I ran into here was that the level was massive and empty. It took way too long to run through the level, and there wasn't enough to do in them either. There's no real need for the tutorial section to be so massive with so many sections. Next, we get into the sandbox area, which is basically empty. I just didn't have any ideas for it, and that's why it suffered for so long. To resolve these issues, I basically went back and redid all of the levels, making them much smaller overall. The tutorial area was much more compact, and the mine entrance now had more to do in it, even if it still lacked direction. I think at this point the problem was less about scale and more about what I wanted the player to do in the level. There were a handful of neat ideas there, but they were disconnected from any kind of story beyond fix the hoist. And so we come to the current iteration of these levels. The other tutorial level is basically unchanged, but the sandbox level is different and more suited to the goals I have in mind with the story. Some areas are for open combat, others have platforming challenges. Really, at this stage, I'm not concerned with scrapping and reworking a level as long as it means I'm learning something new and improving my game. So that's basically it for now. I have a ton of other stuff I could talk about, but I'll need to put that into another video. Thanks for waiting so patiently for an update. It's been a crazy time. I spent quite a bit of it not really knowing what to do next, feeling like I'm not sure if I'm making any progress, but of course I was. I think that these videos really help me. I get to see how much progress I actually made. It's like a milestone. Like, hey, I was here a few months ago and now look where I am. If you like the video, consider leaving a like. If you have any questions or just want to say something, feel free to comment down below. And remember to subscribe and click the bell to be notified when another video goes up. You can also find me on Twitter at pjstella_game, where I post updates frequently. There's also a link to my Discord channel in the description. I like to stream there sometimes, and there's usually people chatting about art and game dev as well. And of course, you can watch the extended devlog by subscribing to my Patreon at patreon.com/projectstella_game. This one being the first with extra footage where I explain Stella's rig. Anyways, that's gonna be it. So thanks for watching, and thanks for waiting patiently, and I hope you guys like what comes in the future, because I'm really excited to share more. I guess I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Super trooper, super trooper, super trooper, and he sells soup.